Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Marked twice, loved once. Episode 5. Chapter 47. Nora's POV. I looked behind me and saw Alpha Leo calmly seated with folded arms. With a frown, I checked the wall clock and noticed that it was 7 p.m. and he wasn't showing any sign of leaving. "This is ridiculous," I scoffed and stood to my feet. With a smile, I said my goodbyes to the kids who expressed their gratitude with a hug. With an exhausted sigh, I walked up to where Alpha Leo sat and met him talking to the patrons. "Thank you so much, Alpha," they both exclaimed while I stared at one of the patrons' hands and saw a check. "This means a lot to us," they thanked him with their heads lowered with respect and gratitude. "It's my duty as your Alpha. I'll make sure I add this orphanage to my scheme of work," he said and turned to me. "Are you done?" he asked, and I nodded. He turned to the patrons and said, "I'll take my leave now." They nodded their heads as he turned and left, but not forgetting to wave his hand to the kids who waved back. We left the orphanage, and I tried to speak, but he cut me off. "Get in, I'll take you there." He spoke in a tone that left no room for arguments, and I was too exhausted to argue with him. With a tired sigh, I entered the car and fastened my seatbelt while he did the same and started the car. In order to avoid him, I looked outside the window, staring at the beauty of the nightfall and the big trees that surrounded our pack. "You haven't had anything to eat. Do you want to grab something?" His question surprised me, and I had to look in his direction, but his eyes were fixed on the road. "No, I'll eat at home," I lied and looked away. "What are you doing?" Lolita questioned. "This is a huge opportunity for us to know him, and also for him to know us," she grumbled, but I ignored her. "He has caused me so much pain, and I don't know what he is up to with this strange behavior." The drive was silent until he pulled up in front of our apartment. "Thank you, Alpha Leo," I spoke formally and slightly lowered my head before going for the door, but he stopped me by holding my wrist but quickly let go of me. Silence enveloped the whole place as I waited for him to speak, and he did but after a moment. "Thank you," he whispered, causing my eyebrows to furrow. "Thank you for letting me go with you," he said, and I became speechless, not knowing what to say or do. "You can leave," he said while looking out his side of the window. Still dumbfounded by his behavior, I got out of the car and made my way to the entrance door. I got in and met Vera in the sitting room, fuming with anger. "You, what were you doing with my man?" she yelled, bringing the attention of everyone to the sitting room. "Answer me, what were you doing in Alpha Leo's car, and why did he bring you home?" she yelled with raging anger. "What's going on here?" Father asked, and she moved her attention towards him. "I went to the mansion, and Nora wasn't at work. In fact, she left the mansion in the morning. She left with Alpha Leo." "You, where did you two go? Did you also freely give him your body like you gave to Lord Madison?" she yelled, and I cut in, "Don't you dare speak to me in such a manner!" I yelled with rising anger. "She will speak to you in whatever way she wants to. You slut!" Mother cursed, shattering my feelings into pieces. I could take any insult from Vera because I knew I could speak back at her, but with Mother, it was different. Every hurtful word she said to me shattered me to pieces. "Enough!" Dad spoke and I moved my gaze, looking for Maxwell and realized he wasn't at home. "Nora!" Dad called, "Why did you leave your duties and go out with your sister's mate and stayed so long with him?" Dad asked with suspicion in his voice, tearing my heart into pieces. "Even you, Dad?" I asked as tears gathered in my eyes. "How could you even have the thoughts of that?" I asked and saw the guilt on Dad's face. With a heavy sigh, I sucked in a deep breath, drawing back my tears. Enough, enough of all this, I said while staring at everyone. I'm no longer a kid and can do whatever I want. I yelled while holding Mom's gaze. Different men troop in here to pick up Vera, but you have never called her names. I spoke with hurt. Deep down you know that all the accusations you lay on me are false, but you just want me to feel pain and heartbroken, but not anymore, Mother. I won't let you hurt me again. I moved my gaze to Vera, who held it back with a hateful stare. Heaven knows I love you as my sister, and even at this moment, I will never hurt you, but you never cease to hurt me and show me how much you hate me. She rolled her eyes and looked away, but I continued, I have nothing against you, Vera, and I do hope you never get to taste a tip of an iceberg of what you have made me go through. I said and turned to Dad's direction. I could see the regrets and hurts in his eyes but looked past it and said, I'm able to live in this house up to this moment because you were by my side, and for that, I'm really grateful, but I think it's time I leave. It would be better for everyone. I spoke with pain and hurriedly took the stairs to my room. As I reached my room, I slumped against the door, trying to catch my breath. With a heavy sigh, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Everything looked the same: my bed, my desk, my closet, but it all felt different now. Everything reminded me of the painful memories here, and I couldn't bear to stay here any longer. Without wasting another moment, I went straight to my closet and started packing. I grabbed a few of my favorite outfits, a few books, and my laptop. I also grabbed a photo of Maxwell and me together. I stuffed everything into a bag and slung it over my shoulder, ready to leave. But before I took the final step, I paused and glanced around my room once more. It was hard to leave everything behind, but it was even harder to stay and keep living in this misery. As I descended the staircase, I felt a mix of emotions. I was sad to be leaving, but I knew it was for the best. They had hurt my feelings, but I knew that I would eventually heal. I was scared of what the future held, but I knew that I was strong enough to face it. As I descended the stairs, I caught a glimpse of Dad sitting on the couch, his expression a mix of sadness and regret. I didn't say anything, didn't even look at him or the others as I walked past them and out the front door. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew that I needed to clear my head and heal. Where do we go now? Lolita asked, and I remained silent, wondering if I should inform Maxwell of what had happened. But I decided against it. I checked the time on my phone and realized it was past 8 p.m. Dora would be awake, so I decided to crash at her place and figure out what to do next. Just as I was about to call her, I heard a voice in my head. Nora, Lord Madison called out. Lord Madison, I responded. I'm almost at your door. Come out, he said before ending the mind link. With a heavy sigh, I stared at the bag in my hand, wondering what I would say to him. I didn't want him to feel pity for me or ask me what had led to this. As I was lost in thought, I saw him pull up before me and step out of the car. He walked up to me and glanced at the bag in my hands for a moment before taking it from me and gesturing me to get into the car. I entered the car nervously and fastened my seatbelt as Lord Madison drove off. The car was oddly silent, and I could sense his anger filling the entire space. I knew something was bothering him, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lord Madison spoke up. His voice was low and filled with anger as he turned to me and asked, "Why did you go out with Alpha Leo?" I was taken aback by the suddenness of his question and the intensity in his voice. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of how to respond. I stammered. It's not what you think, I said, trying to defend myself. Lord Madison's grip on the steering wheel tightened, and I could see his jaw clenching. You can't just go out with Alpha Leo. We have a plan, and you have to stick with it. Lord Madison's POV. Her silence angered me, causing me to hit the steering wheel of the car. I received a call in the early hours of the morning that required my attention. I took a 5-hour flight to Miami, where I was supposed to stay for the night after signing the deal, but the thought of her got me worried, and I found myself taking a flight back. Upon arriving at the mansion, I asked Emma if Nora had already left for the day, but Emma informed me that Nora had left with Alpha Leo and had not returned. I'm sorry, she spoke, bringing me out of my thoughts. Sorry won't change anything, Nora. We have a plan, and you'll only do what I tell you to do to make this work. How difficult is that for you? I asked with raging anger. I slammed the steering wheel of the car. I was angry, but deep down, I just couldn't explain why. It wasn't my intention to go out with him, she spoke in a whisper, more like she was about to break down. I had a voluntary service to do in an orphanage and asked for his permission to let me go, but he said he would allow me to go if I let him come with me. I had no choice, she whispered in a hurtful voice, causing me to regret the way I reacted and spoke to her. I swear we were just at the orphanage and nowhere else, she added, while I released a heavy sigh and shook my head. Leo was up to something, and I couldn't tell if he was doing this because he thought I wanted her, or if he was actually doing this because he was developing feelings for her. I promise it won't happen again. Please don't stop helping me, she pleaded, while I didn't say a word but continued driving until I pulled up in front of an apartment. Where is this place? She asked as I turned off the engine. It belonged to my wife, a gift I gave to her on her last birthday, I grumbled and got out of the car. She was from this pack? Nora asked as she also got out of the car. Yes, I responded and took a deep breath, staring at the house that held so many memories of my mate. And why are we here? She asked, staring at me with curiosity. Because you have no place to go, I responded, and began walking to the entrance door. Before I could knock, the door opened, and the housekeeper, who was a 20-year-old boy, lowered his head with respect. Greetings, Lord Madison, he greeted, stepping aside for us to walk in. Greetings, Louise. How have you been? I asked. Very well, sir, he responded, and I nodded before moving my gaze around the sitting room. Everything looked the same and properly kept. I moved my gaze to the couch, and memories of my late wife and I making love on it buzzed in my head. I moved my gaze to the painted color on the wall and remembered how she complained about the color on the wall. I recalled she told me she would change the interior design of the apartment on our next vacation here. I moved my gaze to the dining table and remembered it was where she announced her pregnancy to me, that I almost choked with excitement. Are you okay? Nora asked, bringing me out from my thoughts. I didn't give an answer, but instead, I stared at her for a moment, wondering what kind of spell she must have cast on me to bring her here. Louise, this is Nora, she will be staying here, make sure she has all she needs to make her comfortable. I instructed and he nodded. Follow me, I gestured and began taking the stairs while I heard her footsteps behind me. The apartment was a one-story building with a bedroom downstairs and 3 upstairs. As I entered the hallway, I passed the first room that held so many memories. Nora followed me with her bag in hand, and we entered the second room. I checked that everything was in order, from the bed to the closet and dressing mirror. You can stay here until you get an apartment, I said, turning to face her. You mean it? She asked, surprised. Thank you, but you don't have to, no buts, you're staying here until you get an apartment, I declared in a tone that brooked no argument. We both remained silent until she spoke. Thank you, Lord Madison. I'm really grateful, she said, and I hummed in acknowledgement before turning to leave. She stopped me by gripping my right wrist but quickly let go when she realized what she had done. Anything else? I asked, holding her gaze. Please don't be mad at me. I swear I didn't intend to go out with him. We didn't kiss or do anything, he doesn't even look at me that way. We just, listen, I interrupted. No, she cut me off. I get it, okay? I understand. Her voice broke a little, and I felt bad to see her sad. I was about to explain and tell her that I was no longer angry, but she didn't let me. Please don't say that you won't help me. You're my only hope to get Alpha Leo to want me. Please don't leave me, she pleaded, tears gathering in her eyes. I felt my defenses weakening with every word she spoke. When I looked into her eyes, I saw the tears and wanted nothing more than to comfort her, to make her smile again. I looked at her lips as she kept talking, and when a tear slipped down her cheek, I pulled her to my chest and slammed my lips on hers. Immediately, a spark of electricity coursed through my veins. She slipped her hand around my waist and kissed me back, making me groan in pleasure. I could feel the heat radiating off her skin as we kissed deeply. Our tongues flicked against each other, and our bodies molded to one another perfectly. At this point, I knew I was out of control, I knew how much I wanted to devour her right now, but I quickly pulled away. That was to get you to stop talking, I said, and she blinked her lashes repeatedly to register my words. Oh, yeah, she smiled, and I nodded, taking 2 steps away from her. An awkward silence enveloped the room until I decided to speak. The housekeeper will be here until morning. He will give you whatever you need, I said, and she nodded lightly, lowering her head. I'll leave now. See you at the mansion, good night, I said, noticing her swollen lips, the result of our intense kiss. As I walked down the stairs, guilt filled me. How could I do such a thing to my mate? It hadn't even been 6 months since I lost her, and here I was, kissing another woman in a house we had so many memories together. Filled with guilt, I got into the car and drove off, my conscience fighting me. After a 15-minute drive, I arrived at the mansion. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I saw Alpha Leo descending the stairs. We held each other's gaze with a challenging look, but I looked away and meant to walk away. Still, he blocked my path. What is the meaning of this, Leo? I asked, and he remained silent for a while before speaking. I believe you went to see Nora. I can smell her all over you, Leo said as he sniffed deeply, but I remained silent. Just because she doesn't bear my mark doesn't mean I won't sense it when she's with another man, he continued, still didn't get a response from me. Stay away from her, he demanded. We've been more than cousins, Madison, and I don't want us to fight over a woman, she's just a woman to you. I cut in, my anger rising. She can be merely a woman to me, but how dare you call your mate just a woman? I fumed with rage. Realizing that I might explode, I took a deep breath and controlled my emotions before speaking again. I'm not in a good mood, Leo, and you know what that means. So move away, I said firmly, but he didn't budge. Instead, he took a step closer and held my gaze with a challenging stare. She's mine, Madison. She belongs to me, and I can have her with just a snap of my fingers. Don't you forget that, he challenged before walking away. As he left, I realized he was getting attracted to Nora, which was a good thing, right? But why do I feel discomfort in my chest? Nora's POV. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window. Blinking my eyes a few times, I took a deep breath and smiled. Slowly, I sat up on the bed, feeling free. Memories of last night's kiss with Lord Madison flooded my mind, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Stop having stupid thoughts and focus on the task ahead, Lolita groaned, and I sighed, pushing the thoughts to the back of my mind. I got up from the bed and did a quick workout before taking a refreshing shower. I got dressed, picked up my bag, and headed downstairs. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw Louis coming out of the kitchen. "Good morning, Nora," he greeted me with a warm smile, which I returned. "Take a seat at the table." "I'm already done with breakfast," he said, and I smiled and took a seat at the dining table. Within a few minutes, Louis set the table, and we started eating. I felt relieved that I could eat in peace without any worries. In the past, my mother would often shoot me hateful glares, but right now, don't feel any of them. "So, you're friends with Lord Madison?" Louis asked, starting a conversation. "Yes, we're friends," I responded, and Louis nodded. "He holds you in high esteem to bring you here," he said, and I smiled at his words, but I became curious. "Can I ask you something?" I asked, and he nodded, gesturing for me to go ahead. "How was she? I mean, Lord Madison's mate?" I asked, and he remained silent for a moment before speaking. "She was perfect," he responded with a sad smile. "She was extremely beautiful, had the ability to heal, and was perfect in all areas. The dream of every man," he said, and I nodded with a weak smile. "Do you want to see her picture?" he asked, and I nodded. "I'll be right back," he said, standing up and leaving me to finish my pancakes. A few minutes later, he came back with a photo frame and handed it to me. As I stared at the photo before me, I realized that she was indeed beautiful. She had a flawless face, stunning sea blue eyes, and an exquisite slender body that I could not help but admire. With a gulp, I handed back the picture frame to Lord Madison and forced the pancakes down my throat. "What were you thinking?" Lolita asked, and I didn't reply. "Did you believe he might be interested in you?" Lolita scoffed. "You have seen that you are not his type. He is only trying to help us find our mate. Stop building fantasies in your head," she urged, while I sighed and finished my meal. After saying goodbye to Louis, I boarded a taxi to the college. On my way to school, Maxwell spoke through the mind link. "Hi Nora, how are you doing?" he asked. "I'm fine," I responded. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to defend you," he apologized. "It's okay, Maxwell. I just needed to leave," I assured him, and he sighed before speaking again. "Dad is worried about you. He kept asking me where you are, but I didn't tell him anything." He paused before he continued, "Are you sure you are comfortable there?" he asked, and I assured him that I was fine before ending the mind link. When I arrived at school, I kept everything from Dora, and fortunately, she didn't notice anything. "Our exams start on Monday. Are you ready?" she asked, and I nodded. "I can't wait to be done with this," Dora said excitedly, but my thoughts drifted to Lord Madison. Occasionally, I kept remembering the kiss, despite my wolf's warning. After lectures, I took a taxi to the mansion and met Lord Madison in the sitting room. "Greetings," I said, and he nodded with an expressionless look on his face, making it difficult to detect his mood. I stood awkwardly before him, and we both didn't say a word until he finally spoke. "Alpha Leo sensed our kiss," he announced, and I gulped. And he seems to be angry, which is a good sign. He continued, and I nodded, unsure of what to say. Our plans are making progress, and before you know it, Alpha Leo will come running to you, he assured me, and I nodded. I saw Lady Emma approaching us with the library keys. I took the keys from her, climbed upstairs to the library, and was about to open it, but I realized it was unlocked. Curious about who was inside, I pushed the door and went in, only to find Alpha Leo sitting on the couch with a book in his hands. He held my gaze for a moment before standing up. Greetings, Alpha Leo, I greeted, but he didn't respond and instead approached me and stood just a step away. With a gulp, I looked away. He had so much dominating presence in him, and his scent was so fascinating that I found myself drawn to it. Nice lipstick, he said while staring at my lips. A hard gulp passed down my throat, and unexpectedly, he pulled me to the wall and placed his hands beside me, entrapping me in the process. What? What games are you playing with Lord Madison? He asked. Whatever games you are playing, they have to stop this very moment, he said, while I stared at him with confused eyebrows. I will accept you as my mate, he declared while I widened my eyes, shocked by his words, ignoring the happy howls from my wolf. But it has to be a secret. His words angered me, and without a second thought, I pushed him away and glared at him with anger and disgust. You want to keep me a secret? I fumed. Thanks for your offer, but I would rather not be your mate, Alpha Leo, I said, completely ignoring Lolita's disapproving howl. Sucking a deep breath, I held his gaze and said, reject me now, Alpha Leo. I demanded, and saw the dumbfounded look in his eyes. Despite how painful it was to say those words, I knew I had to do it. You don't have to reject me in public, in fact, no one has to know. All you have to do is reject me right here and now, I mumbled as tears gathered in my eyes. I knew what I was doing was impulsive, but I just couldn't take it anymore. His words made me realize that no matter how hard I tried to make him accept me, he would never accept me. That was a fact I had to accept. With tears-filled eyes, I held his gaze, which had an expressionless look, before saying, Nora, daughter of, I reject your rejection. He cut me off, holding my gaze firmly. Nora, I reject your rejection. He spoke firmly and took 2 steps forward towards me. You are mine, Nora, and nobody can change that, not even you. He spoke firmly and walked away, while I remained numb, wondering what he was up to. This what he wanted, why then was he not accepting it? What were you trying to do? Lolita asked. What I should have done a long time ago, I murmured. No, Nora, I won't let you do that, she disapproved while I released a heavy sigh and sat behind my desk. I knew Lolita was scared and worried about the pain she might go through, but I believed that Maxwell might be right and that we could get through it and just let him go. To clear my head, I picked up a book and began reading. No one visited the library until I closed it for the day. As I locked up the library, I took the stairs downstairs and met Alpha Leo at the bar. Ignoring his presence, I made my way to the door, but he stopped me. What does he want? I grumbled as I stood in place while he left the bar and walked up to me. He remained silent for a moment before speaking. I'll drive you home, he said, and just as I was about to respond, Lord Madison spoke from the stairs. That wouldn't be necessary, Leo. I'm driving her, he declared, and Alpha Leo instantly replied, stay out of this, Madison. I'm driving her home, he challenged, while Lord Madison scoffed and stood beside me. You want to take her home? Do you even know where she lives? He asked, and Alpha Leo furrowed his eyebrows, confused by the question. I moved my gaze to Lord Madison and saw the devilish smirk on his face. She now lives in my apartment. I believe you know what that means. You. Alpha Leo yelled and grabbed Lord Madison's collar. Alpha Leo's POV, let go of me this very minute, Leo. Madison yelled, but I ignored him and tightened my grip on his collar. Did you touch her? I asked through our mind link, but he didn't respond. Answer me. I yelled with a mix of anger and jealousy building up inside me. So many thoughts were buzzing in my head, and I hoped they weren't true. What is going on here? Mother asked from the stairs, but I didn't move an inch, neither did I let go of Madison's collar. What is going on? Mother asked again as she quickly descended the stairs. Alpha Leo, let go of your brother's collar, Mom demanded, but I didn't. I was consumed with so much anger, and the thoughts of Madison touching Nora were torture to me. Leo! Mother yelled and held my hand. With an angry groan, I let go of Madison's collar and took a deep breath. He is not my brother, Mother, he is just my cousin, I spoke while shooting him a hateful glare. What does this mean? Mother asked no one in particular. Nothing, Aunt, Leo was just taking Nora home, Madison spoke and walked away. I moved my gaze to Nora, who had a terrified look on her face before moving it back to Mother. I will take Nora home, I said and turned to Nora, who shot me a hateful glare. Let's go, I said and walked away, and she followed me behind. We both entered the car, and I started the engine before driving off. The drive was awkwardly silent, and I wished I could tell what she was thinking. Angrily, I hit the steering wheel of the car, and Madison's thoughts buzzed in my head. I couldn't endure it anymore. Did he touch you? I asked, my gaze fixed on the road, but she didn't respond, which angered me even more. You have no right to get angry, Ethan spoke, irritated. If only you had accepted her, then Lord Madison wouldn't have had the privilege to touch her, he yelled, causing a heavy sigh to leave my lips. With a frown, I stared at Nora and noticed something had changed about her, something I just couldn't point out. The drive was silent until I pulled up in front of Madison's apartment. She didn't say a word, rather, she got out of the car, and I also left the car. I was expecting her to walk away, but she walked over to my side of the car and stood before me. I believe you need an answer to your question, she said, holding my gaze with a stern look. Yes, he kissed me, and not just that, but he touched me and made me feel like a woman, something you can never do. I didn't let her finish her words before I slammed her back against the car and pinned her hands above her head. What? Before she could finish her words, I slammed my lips on hers. She struggled to get out of my grip, but it was useless. Rather, I tightly sealed my lips on hers and pressed my body against hers. I took my lips away and held her gaze, which was filled with anger. You think I can't do better than him? I asked with jealousy and, without waiting for a response, went to the crook of her neck and nipped it. I noticed she tried releasing herself from my grip again, but it was useless. I moved away from her neck and began placing kisses on her shoulders, let go of her hands, and wrapped my hands around her waist. Mine. Ethan growled in my head, causing a different type of feeling to envelop me. My hand traveled upwards to caress the smooth skin at the nape of her neck before finding her breasts and sealing my lips with hers. This time, she didn't resist me, but rather, she deepened the kiss. I looked at her, and her eyes were shut tight. I closed mine as well, allowing myself to get lost in the kiss. At that moment, everything about her turned me on. Her scent, her face, her body, everything sent me into a frenzy. But just when I thought I was in heavenly bliss, I felt a hot slap on my cheek. Nora had slapped me. With confused eyebrows, I held her gaze but not with anger. "This is for the pain you made me go through," she said and began walking away but stopped and turned in my direction, "and for clarification, he was way better than you." She mocked and walked away while I just stood and watched as her words played in my head. "Don't let her walk away, go after her," Ethan urged, but I kicked against it, entered the car, and drove back to the mansion. When I walked into the sitting room, I met my mother sitting there, obviously waiting for my return. "I need to have a word with you," Mother said, getting on her feet. "What was the meaning of what I saw?" she asked, anger fuming in her. "Not now, Mother," I groaned and made my way to leave, but she stopped me. "I ask a question, Alpha Leo, and I believe I deserve an answer," she demanded while holding my left wrist. With a grunt, I held her gaze but didn't say a word. "What are you really doing, Leo? You know how much it took for me to get Madison to come here? You know how much I pleaded with him to come here, Leo?" she yelled while I groaned. "You know he is going through a lot at this moment, and I don't care what the matter is, but you have to hold yourself," she warned, and I groaned but didn't move an inch away. I respected Mother so much and wouldn't disrespect her by walking away. I heard her take a deep breath before letting go of my hand. "What happened?" she asked, and I couldn't give an answer. "I tried speaking to Madison, but he wouldn't speak to me," she said, waiting for a response, "but I couldn't speak." "I mean, how do I tell her everything?" "You're not going to speak to me about it?" she asked, and I sighed before placing a kiss on her forehead. "Good night, Mother," I bade her good night and made my way to my room. I arrived at my room, showered, and laid on the bed with just a blanket on my body. As I tried to close my eyes, memories of Nora played in my head, and I couldn't help but smile, but later frowned when I realized she didn't feel the way I felt. "Ethan," I called my wolf, and he responded, "What do we do?" I asked desperately. "You are the one who caused the mess, so you have to fix it," my wolf responded with anger and shut himself away from me. With a heavy sigh, I pondered in thoughts, wondering what I would do and knew the solution was to announce her as my maid to everyone, but how do I do that when Mother has already announced Vera to everyone? "Then let Lord Madison take her," Ethan growled in my head, but I couldn't bear to listen to him anymore. With a heavy sigh, I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the window. I groaned and rubbed my eyes before checking the clock. It was already 7 a.m. I dragged myself out of bed and took a quick shower. Just as I was about to get dressed, Ethan's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Maid is here," he announced while I sucked a deep breath and got dressed. While I combed my hair, I tried to think of ways to make her forgive me and accept my offer. At least until I can tell the truth to Mother. "A week," I murmured to myself. "In a week's time, I'll tell the truth to everyone, and hopefully, Mom will forgive me." I left my room and heard voices from the dinner table, one of which I recognized as Nora's. I knew she was in the mansion, but I didn't expect her to be in the dining room. Curiosity got the best of me, so I hurried my steps and made my way to the dining room. When I arrived, I saw Nora seated beside Madison with a big smile on her face. Mother noticed my presence and flashed me a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Alpha Leo. Your cousin, Lord Madison, says he has an announcement to make," she said while I held my gaze with Nora, who looked away. "I have something to say, but it has to be within the family for now until I'm ready to tell it to the world," Madison said while holding my gaze, and I furrowed my eyebrows, wondering what he was up to. I saw him take hold of Nora's hand, place a kiss on it, and then hold my gaze again. Nora and I are dating, he announced. Nora's POV, we're dating, Lord Madison announced, and I gulped, staring at Lord Madison, who gave me an assuring smile. Stay at ease, he comforted me through the mind link. I took a deep breath before holding Alpha Leo's gaze, which was filled with anger. Wow, Lady Christabel tried to speak, but Alpha Leo cut in. That's impossible, he yelled, forcing Lord Madison to his feet. And why is that impossible, Alpha Leo? Could you please give me a good reason for it? Lord Madison challenged. Alpha Leo instantly replied, because you're still mourning the death of your mate. Alpha Leo turned to Lady Christabel. This is absurd, Mother. Don't tell me you're agreeing to this. He asked Lady Christabel, who remained silent. She held my gaze, but I nervously looked away, wondering what she must be thinking of me. Wanting to date a man who just lost his wife a few months ago. I see nothing wrong with it, Alpha Leo. Lord Madison is an adult, and he knows what is best for him, Lady Christabel spoke with a warm smile. Alpha Leo scoffed and held my gaze. Is this a joke? He asked through telepathy, but I ignored him, but unable to ignore the hurt in his voice. Nora, he asked, almost in a shattering voice, but I gulped and closed the mind link. I believe Alpha Leo has nothing to say about this. Lord Madison asked, staring at Alpha Leo, who didn't say a word but rather stormed out of the dining room. Everyone remained silent for a moment until Lady Christabel spoke. Don't worry about Alpha Leo. You know he had a close relationship with Lord Madison's mate, so he thought he was doing the best. But not to worry, he will accept your love. She spoke with a weak smile, and I nodded, looking at Lord Madison's direction. He gave me an assuring nod and gestured for me to eat. As we ate, I couldn't help but wonder what was going on in Alpha Leo's mind. The way he spoke to me through the mind link proved that Lord Madison was right. Lord Madison suggested that I come to the mansion, and we act this way. He told me that such an announcement would make Alpha Leo heartbroken, that no alpha would want his mate in the arms of another man. At first, I didn't want to accept it because it's a huge lie, but Lord Madison assured me that he had everything under control. Stop thinking and eat up, Lord Madison spoke through the mind link, and I nodded and began eating. I noticed Lady Christabel's gaze on me, and it made me uncomfortable. I wondered what was in her thoughts, what she would think of me. After having breakfast with Lord Madison and Lady Christabel, I excused myself and went up to the library. I went in and met Alpha Leo in the library, not that I was surprised about it. Alpha Leo, I greeted, and he didn't give a response. Rather, he walked up to me, his gaze holding mine. He got to where I stood and took a deep breath before speaking. Tell me what I heard downstairs was a joke, he urged, but I shook my head. You can't possibly be dating him. You are my mate, for God's sake, he groaned, and I scoffed and shook my head. You made it clear that you didn't want me, I reminded him, recalling the hurtful words he had said to me. All of that is in the past now, Nora. I want you, he said, taking a step closer. I want you now, he pleaded, attempting to caress my cheek. However, I looked away. Just give me a week to make everything right, he pleaded, forcing me to meet his gaze. I'll announce to everyone that you're my mate. I don't care if they call me a lying alpha or say terrible things about me. All that matters is that you're by my side. Why now, Alpha Leo? Why the sudden change of heart? I asked, still hurt by his previous words. I'm still that plus-sized, unattractive girl you called ugly just a few weeks ago. What's different now? He went silent for a moment before speaking. "Wait here, I'll be back," he said before walking away. "I think he regrets his actions. Why don't we forgive him?" Lolita suggested, but I cut her off. "Not so soon, Lolita." "Not so soon," I replied, making my way to the shelf. As I arranged the books on the shelf, the door opened and Alpha Leo walked in, holding a small box. "I want to show you something," he said, taking steps closer to me. "Here, have it." He extended his hand and handed me the box. At first, I hesitated to take it, but my curiosity got the better of me and I accepted it from him. Nora's POV, I stared at him and he gave me the go-ahead nod before I slowly opened the box and saw a brown envelope. "What's in there?" I asked, turning to look at Alpha Leo. He gave me a nod, indicating that I should open it. With trembling fingers, I tore the envelope and let out a little gasp as I peeked inside. It was a photograph of a plus-size, chubby-faced young boy of about 10 years old, with rosy cheeks and a wide grin. He was dressed in a brightly colored outfit that seemed to clash with the rustic background behind him. As I stared at the picture with furrowed eyebrows, I couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. The boy in the photograph had strikingly similar eyes to Alpha Leo, and his features bore a striking resemblance to him. "Who is this kid?" I asked, looking up at Alpha Leo in confusion. "Why are you giving me this picture?" Alpha Leo's expression softened as he gazed down at the photograph in my hand. "That's me," he said simply. My eyes widened. "You mean, this is a picture of you when you were a kid?" I asked, feeling a sense of shock. Alpha Leo nodded. "Yes. I was always a little on the chubby side when I was growing up." As I looked back down at the photograph, I couldn't help but feel shocked at it. "While growing up, did you hear much about me?" he asked, and I shook my head, truthfully. I didn't hear much about him, but what I did know is that he went to study in France and came back to the pack when he turned 17. "Not many people know about this," he said, taking a deep breath. "When I was 7, I left the pack and went to stay with Madison and his family. They had the best academy, and my father wanted the best for me, so he sent me there and hid my identity." He paused, and I held his gaze, noticing he was finding it hard to speak. "I was bullied when I was young. I was mocked and laughed at because of my body size," he said, hesitating for a moment before continuing. "I almost lost my sanity, but no one knew except for Madison's late younger sister. I became depressed, and no one knew, not even Madison because he attended a different college. Every day, when I went to the academy, they bullied me and called me all manner of names. Whenever I went to bed, their words kept ringing in my head, and every night, I went to bed soaking my pillow with tears." He gulped, took a deep breath, and stopped himself from crying. "Mine," Lolita whispered in pain. "I endured all those hurtful words, but when I turned 12 years old, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to lose weight. I quit school for 3 years and went to live with a personal trainer who had a gym. My mother kicked against it, but my father supported my decision." He paused and took another deep breath before continuing. "I lost a lot of weight and came back to the pack," he said, and took a step towards me. "When I met you, memories that I have tried so hard to bury flashed in my head, and I became scared, wondering what they would say about us. But now I realize all that doesn't matter because you are my mate, and you are extremely beautiful," he said, taking hold of my left hand. "Please forgive me, Nora. I apologize for all the terrible things I said to you. I know no amount of apologies will make up for the pain I made you go through, but I swear on my father's grave that I would spend the rest of my life making it up to you," he pleaded, holding my gaze, waiting for a response. I couldn't respond because I was shocked and dumbfounded by all this. I won't change my body size because of you, I managed to speak. I don't want you to. You are amazingly beautiful, and it still baffles me why I never saw it until now, he said. His words made Lolita howl excitedly, but I didn't let that get to me. Apologies, Alpha Leo, but I think it's a little too late for all this. Lord Madison and I are dating, I spoke, ignoring the disapproving howl from Lolita. That can't be possible, Nora. How can you claim you're dating a man whom you don't know, he said, and I scoffed before responding. What makes you think that I don't know Lord Madison? I asked, and he scoffed and took another step closer to me. You know him? He asked with raised eyebrows, and I nodded. At least I know he is the Lord of the Hybrids, has the gift of healing, and is compassionate towards me. No, you don't, he said, and I furrowed my eyebrows, wondering what he meant. Apart from being a healer, what other abilities do you know he possesses? He asked, and I furrowed my eyebrows, confused by his words. Does he have other abilities apart from being a healer? I asked, curious and confused. Alpha Leo shook his head and stepped forward to me. Unexpectedly, he placed a kiss on my forehead. I'll give you the opportunity to ask him yourself. After all, he is your boyfriend, he said, with a warm smile, taking the box from my hands and walking away, leaving me curious and confused. He just apologized. Why did you have to lie about dating Lord Madison? Lolita spoke angrily, but I didn't pay attention to her. All I worried about was what Alpha Leo had just said to me. His words made me so curious and uncomfortable. With so many thoughts buzzing in my head, I sat behind my desk. Just when I was about to switch on the desktop, the door opened, and Lady Christabel walked in. I quickly stood up. May I help you with something? I asked, but she shook her head and said, come over here, come have a seat with me. She gestured for me to sit on the couch. I left my desk and made my way to the couch, sitting on the one-seater couch across from Lady Christabel. You seem so nervous. You don't have to be, she said with a warm smile, which I returned. I just have a question for you, she said, and I nodded, waiting for what she had to say. Are you sure you agreed to date Lord Madison of your own free will? She asked, and I furrowed my eyebrows, wondering what she meant by her words. I don't understand what you mean, I tried to speak, but she cut me off. I don't mean to scare you, but you know I really like you and mean the best for you, she spoke, and I became more confused, wondering what she meant. I'm just curious, wondering if you are under any influence, she asked while I stared at her, getting more confused. Under any influence? I asked, and she sighed before speaking. Listen, Madison is like a son to me, and I know him as a really good man. But I was surprised when he declared that you two are dating. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy for you two, but I just want to be sure you know what you are doing. What do you mean? I tried speaking, but the click of the door shifted my attention to the door, where I saw Lord Madison walking in. I held his gaze with curiosity before getting up on my feet. I'll leave now, Lady Christabel said and walked away, leaving me with Lord Madison. I stood in one spot, still holding his gaze, while the words of Alpha Leo and Lady Christabel buzzed in my head. Why are you looking at me in such a manner? He asked while taking steps towards me. Out of impulse, I took a step backwards. What is wrong? He asked, and I gulped. What did they say to you? He demanded, and I gathered all the courage in me to speak. What other abilities do you have apart from being a healer? I asked and saw him stare at me for a moment before taking another step closer. What did they say to you? He demanded, sounding angry. Nothing, Lord Madison. I was just curious about what other abilities you possess. And what makes you think I have other abilities? He asked, and I gulped and looked away. I believe you heard what I said? What makes you think I have other abilities? He asked, and I sucked in a deep breath and slightly lowered my head respectfully. Apologies, please ignore my questions, I mumbled and made my way to my desk. But he grabbed my wrist and made me hold his gaze. I have another ability, he spoke, still holding my gaze. I have the ability to make people do whatever I want them to do. All I have to do is look into their eyes, he spoke, causing a cold shiver to run down my spine. But do you think I would use it on you? He asked, his tone disappointed and hurtful. Nora's POV, is that what you think of me? That I would use such abilities on you? He asked, and I gulped, shaking my head. Do you think I would use such powers against you? He inquired, and I couldn't speak, only shaking my head in response. He remained silent for a moment before explaining, I only use that ability when I need to interrogate someone, nothing more. He turned to leave, but I grabbed his wrist, forcing him to face me. I didn't mean to accuse you. I was just curious about your other abilities, I pleaded, but the look in his eyes made it clear he didn't believe me. I'm sorry, Lord Madison, I added, still holding his gaze. He didn't say a word, instead, he held my gaze briefly, then removed my grip from his wrist and walked away. I'm sorry, I pleaded as I watched him walk away. With a frown, I wearily massaged my forehead, wondering what I had done wrong. Maybe I should have asked him in a more respectful manner, and perhaps he wouldn't have become so angry. Throughout the day, I struggled to concentrate on my work as my mind kept wandering between Alpha Leo and Lord Madison. I totally understood what Alpha Leo had told me, but that didn't justify him rejecting me so abruptly. I thought about Lord Madison and imagined how he must be feeling. I shouldn't have approached him in such manner. Glancing at the time, I realized it was already 7 p.m. With a heavy sigh, I gathered my things and locked up the library. As I ascended the stairs towards the living room, I met a servant on the stairs. I inquired about Lord Madison, and she suggested he might be in his room since he hadn't left the mansion. You should just go home, Lolita suggested, but I shook my head, turned, and continued climbing the stairs. I located his room and knocked, but there was no response. Maybe we should just leave, Lolita suggested again, but I ignored her, knocked again, and waited. After a minute, the door swung open, and Lord Madison stood before me, shirtless. With a gulp, I stared at his well-built body and quickly averted my gaze. Why are you here? He asked, and I couldn't find the words to respond. Aren't you scared that I might manipulate you? He asked, and I spoke up quickly. I'm so sorry, please hear me out, I pleaded, maintaining eye contact. To my surprise, he left the door and walked in. I followed him inside but remained near the door. Keep talking, he demanded, moving towards the minibar and pouring himself a glass of whiskey. I didn't think you would use your abilities on me. I was genuinely curious about your other powers, nothing more, I spoke truthfully. He didn't say a word but stood by the window, his back turned to me. I understand if you no longer want to help me, but I want you to know that I never suspected you of using your abilities on me, I continued truthfully. He remained silent, and I gulped, staring at him despite the discomfort in my chest. Can you say something? I pleaded, but he ignored me completely. We should just leave, Lolita suggested again, and this time I agreed with her. Without uttering a word, I exited the room. With a heavy heart, I descended the stairs and met Alpha Leo walking through the sitting room. Our eyes met, and I quickly looked away. "Greetings," I greeted, slightly lowering my head. "Are you heading home?" he asked, and I nodded. "I can give you a ride," he offered, but I politely declined. It wasn't an offer, he spoke firmly, and began walking away. With a frown, I followed him and got into the car while he took the driver's seat and drove off. The drive was silent until he spoke up. "What can I do to make you forgive me?" he asked, and I didn't respond. "Nora, I believe I deserve a second chance," he pleaded, but I remained silent, completely ignoring Lolita's words in my head. "I will do anything to make you forgive me," he expressed those words as a promise, yet I still didn't respond. The drive continued in awkward silence as I pondered how things could change so much within a few weeks. I recalled about the days I cried, and now he was asking for my forgiveness. "What are you doing, Nora?" Lolita questioned, but I didn't give a response. The car came to a halt, and we both got out. I walked to Alpha Leo's side and slightly lowered my head. "Thanks for the ride," I spoke, and he didn't say a word. Instead, he moved closer to me and, without warning, kissed my lips before pulling away. With stunned eyes, I held his gaze as he flickered a warm smile that made my heart flutter. "Tomorrow is my birthday," he said. "I don't want to celebrate it, but I'd like to take you out to dinner," he pleaded, and I didn't know what to say. "Please don't say no," he pleaded, and I found myself nodding. "Thanks, I'll come pick you up at 7 p.m., he said, and I nodded, quickly walking away, ignoring Lolita's joyful howl. I hurriedly reached the door, opened it, and locked it. I took the stairs to my room, undressed, and took a shower. After bathing, I wrapped a towel around my chest and entered the room, but my heart nearly leaped out of my chest when I found Lord Madison seated on the bed. "Why do you act like you've seen a ghost?" he spoke as he stood and made his way toward me. I gulped before speaking. "How did you get in?" I asked, and he scoffed before responding, "I have my keys," he replied, causing me to gulp as he stood before me, his intense gaze meeting mine. "You told me that you were sorry," he asked, and I nodded, wondering what he meant. "Well, let's see how sorry you are," he spoke, and without waiting for a response, he slammed his lips onto mine, wrapping his arm around my waist and pulling me close. I willingly opened my mouth, and he slid his tongue inside, while his other hand moved on my exposed thighs. I felt a wave of unfamiliar sensations envelop me, and I released a soft moan, tangling my fingers in his hair. I heard him release a soft groan and felt him place kisses on my neck and shoulders as I slowly closed my eyes, moaning for more. He ran his fingers along my exposed thighs and slowly made his way under the towel, causing my body to shiver with pleasure. With a moan, I threw my head backward as I felt his fingers slightly brush against my private area. But, just as he was about to go further, the door opened, forcing my attention towards it to see Alpha Leo standing by the door. "Mine!" Lolita's voice echoed in my head, and before I could fully comprehend what was happening, Alpha Leo burst into the room and forcibly pulled Lord Madison away from me. "How dare you!" he yelled, delivering a powerful blow on Lord Madison, and surprisingly, Lord Madison chose not to retaliate. "How could you do this to me? She's my mate, for goodness sake!" Alpha Leo's voice trembled with anger as he threw another punch at Lord Madison. With anger-filled eyes, he held my gaze, giving me the opportunity to see his eyes clouded with tears. "Why?" he asked. "What can he offer you that I can't?" His hurtful words caused Lolita to whimper in pain. I've apologized, I've promised to right my wrongs. Can't you give me a chance? His voice cracked, tears streaming down his cheeks. With a heavy swallow, he shifted his gaze to Lord Madison, whose expression remained blanked. I despise you, Madison. I hate both of you for causing me so much pain. Alpha Leo shouted before storming out of the room. Consumed by guilt, I held Lord Madison's gaze, noticing a cut on his lip. Are you all right? I mustered the courage to ask, attempting to approach him. But he halted my steps with a raised hand. Don't come any closer, he demanded, leaving my words trapped in my throat. I'm sorry, he whispered, his words catching me off guard, and I furrowed my brow in confusion. I went too far in all this, he said, but I interrupted, you are not the only one to be blamed. I spoke, but he shook his head and lowered his gaze to the floor. Leo is not a bad person and should not be treated this way. You don't know the pain of seeing your mate being touched by another, and when that person happens to be your cousin. He mumbled with guilt and lifted his head to hold my gaze, and without uttering a single word, he turned and quietly left the room, leaving me with tears streaming down my cheeks. How did things get so complicated? Alpha Leo's POV. Leo, are you okay? Mother asked for the 100th time, knocking on my door, but I didn't respond. Leo, what's wrong? You've been in your room all day, she spoke with concern. Still, I remained silent and instead emptied the bottle of whiskey into my mouth. Talk to me, son. Is there a problem with the pack? It's your birthday today, how can you lock yourself in there? She pleaded, but I remained silent. The image of seeing Madison with Nora tormented my soul, and my wolf, Ethan, was heartbroken. With a heavy sigh, I opened another bottle and took a gulp. My vision was blurred, and my throat burned with pain, but none of that compared to the pain in my heart. Son, Vera, your mate, is here, Mother announced. Alpha Leo, it's me, Vera. Can you please open up? She pleaded, causing another heavy sigh to escape my lips. I knew it was time to end this and have a conversation with Vera. Slowly, I got up from my seat, my feet weak and my vision blurry. I walked to the door and slightly opened it to see Mother and Vera standing before me. What's wrong, son? Mother asked in a worried tone, but I ignored her and gestured for Vera to come in before locking the door. Alpha Leo, are you okay? She asked, but I didn't respond. Instead, I slowly sank to the ground and took another large swig from the bottle. Alpha, this has to end, I interrupted. I no longer want these lies. I'm going to tell the truth to everyone, I whispered, closing my eyes as images of Nora kept playing in my mind. What are you saying, Alpha Leo? You can't be serious, Vera spoke, causing an angry groan to escape my lips. It's over, Vera. The plan is over, I said, hearing her scoff in disbelief before she replied, don't tell me you're thinking of accepting Nora as your mate, and what's wrong with that? I asked. Everything. Everything is wrong with that. What will people say? That their alpha is mated to someone like her, she mocked, causing my wolf to howl in anger. Get out, I yelled, opening my eyes. Alpha, she tried to speak, but I cut her off. Get out this very minute. I yelled furiously, and she quickly stood on her feet. Get out. I yelled, and she obeyed. With a pounding heart, I emptied the bottle into my mouth and tried to stand, but I stumbled and fell to the ground. I tried once again and managed to get to my feet. With unsteady steps, I made my way to the bed and collapsed onto it, slowly closing my eyes to sleep. Alpha Leo. I heard Nora's voice in my head and slowly opened my eyes to see her lying beside me with a smile. Nora, is that you? I asked and slowly caressed her cheek. Yes, it's me, Alpha Leo, and I'm here to make you feel better. She spoke and softly placed a kiss on my lips before pulling away. Just stay still, and I'll make you feel better. Before I could say a word, she climbed on top of me and began unbuttoning my shirt in a swift motion. Nora, are you sure? I spoke drunkenly, and she lowered her lips to my left ear. Should I do it with you or with Lord Madison? She asked, causing series of jealousy to envelope my entire being. I want you, so don't refuse me. She mumbled and slowly licked my ear and continued unbuttoning my shirt. She took off my shirt and unzipped my jeans before taking it off and throwing it on the floor. I closed my eyes, feeling the satisfaction. Our moans and clapping of our skins filled the entire room until I collapsed on the bed on my back and fell asleep. Wake up, Leo, Ethan growled loudly in my head, jolting me out of my sleep. With a groan, I opened my eyes and felt a throbbing headache. My vision was blurry, but then I noticed a body pressed against mine. Furrowing my brows, I turned my head and realized it was Vera, sleeping in my arms. You, I shouted, pushing her away and jumping out of bed. Good morning, Alpha Leo, she greeted with a yawn. How did you get in here? I asked, my eyes wide, scanning the room and noticing our scattered clothes and empty bottles of alcohol. Quickly, I put on my underwear and held her gaze. Come on, Alpha Leo. Don't tell me you don't remember everything that happened last night, she whispered seductively as she gracefully rose from the bed and approached me. You moaned my name, craving more, she added, while I shook my head and squeezed my eyes shut, desperately trying to recollect, but all I could recall was Nora. It was Nora, not you, I exclaimed, earning a loud chuckle from her. It was never Nora, Alpha Leo. It was me, she smiled, attempting to reach me, but I pushed her away and ran my fingers through my hair, filled with regret. What have I done? I groaned while gazing at Vera, who sat on the bed with a triumphant smirk on her face. You're wicked, I uttered, pointing a finger at her. Leave! I yelled, but she didn't budge an inch. I said, leave! I demanded, seething with anger, and finally, she obeyed, getting out of the bed and hastily putting on her clothes while I turned away with disgust. After getting dressed, she walked over to me, flashing a victorious smile. Last night was splendid, she smirked and sauntered away, leaving me consumed by regret and anger. I pacing aimlessly in my room. How did this happen? I shouted, and Ethan couldn't offer any response. Nora, I need to see Nora, I muttered in panic and hurried to the shower. I took a quick bath, hastily got dressed, and stormed out of the room, completely ignoring the pounding ache in my head. Arriving at the library, I realized it was locked. I ascended the stairs to the living room and found Mother and Vera engaged in conversation, which ceased as they noticed my presence. Son, Mom spoke with joy, rising to her feet and approaching me. You're awake, she said, visibly relieved, and I nodded, casting a hateful glare at Vera. What is she doing here? I asked Mother, who stared at me with a puzzled expression. You mean Vera? Your mate, she asked, and I clenched my fists in anger. Where is Nora? I asked Mother, who furrowed her brow confused. Is something wrong? She inquired, but I didn't respond. Instead, I scanned the room and spotted Emma descending the stairs. Emma, I called out, and she quickly made her way to me. Where is Nora? I questioned, awaiting a quick reply. She took a 2 days leave, she responded, and I groaned, storming out of the house, ignoring mother's calls. As I approached the garage, I met Jason, who had just arrived at the mansion, wearing a concerned expression. Alpha, there's a problem, he spoke, and the look in his eyes indicated that something was wrong. Your presence is urgently required in the meeting hall, and afterward, you must depart for London, he informed me, causing me to stare at him with a confused gaze. What you fear has occurred, Alpha Leo, and you know what that means, he added, causing a heavy sigh to escape my lips. The people of London need you, and they need you immediately, he pleaded while I took a deep breath and pondered. I needed to see Nora and explain things to her, but the more time I spent here, the more the lives of all the werewolves in London might be in danger. Fine, let's leave, I said, and I made my way to the meeting hall. 2 weeks later. Are you okay? Jason asked, but I didn't respond. Your name is being sung throughout London, Alpha, and your people are thrilled to have you back, Jason spoke again, still receiving no response from me. My thoughts drifted to Nora. I had been away for the past 2 weeks and hadn't had a chance to see her. While in London, I tried to make a mind link with her, but she blocked my access to her. From my findings, I discovered that she was still working in the mansion, and I couldn't wait to ask for her forgiveness and introduce her to everyone. We have arrived, Jason's words snapped me out of my thoughts. I saw Mother, Vera, and my gammas waiting outside the mansion to welcome us. This wasn't necessary, I sighed as I stepped out of the car. My son is back, Mother spoke happily and gave me a tight hug, while I locked eyes with Vera. What are you still doing here? I asked her telepathically, but she didn't respond. Instead, she smiled widely. I'm glad you're back, Mother exclaimed in relief as she pulled away. There's good news awaiting you, she said with a big smile, which I couldn't quite understand. Nora's POV, are you sure about this? Lolita asked, and I nodded before entering the gate to the mansion. As I made my way to the sitting room, I saw Lord Madison walking out of the mansion, with maids following behind him carrying luggage. The moment our eyes met, I stood frozen, locking my gaze with his. It had been 2 weeks since I last saw him, and all my attempts to reach out to him had been in vain. He had secluded himself in his room, instructing the servants not to let me in. I had contemplated quitting my job at the mansion, but the desire to see him kept me hanging on. However, after realizing my efforts were fruitless, I had decided to give up. Go talk to him, Lolita urged, and I obeyed, approaching him while maintaining eye contact. When I reached him, he stood there, his brown eyes still fixed on mine. Lord, I began, but he interrupted me abruptly. I need to have a word with you. Come with me to the garage, he said, not waiting for a response, and walked away. I followed him, my mind buzzing with thoughts. We reached the garage, and he turned to face me, holding my gaze for a moment before speaking. I'm leaving, he announced, and a lump formed in my throat. The only reason I stayed here was because Leo was away, but fortunately, he's coming back. He continued as I remained silent, waiting for him to finish. He took a deep breath before speaking again. I believe my work here is done. He tried speaking, but I cut in. How sure are you about that, Lord Madison? I asked, and he didn't say a word for a moment, but rather he held my gaze and looked away. He told me himself, that once he gets back, he will announce you to everyone. He spoke while Lolita howled happily, but I felt different about it and didn't know when I blurted out. Us, what about us? I asked and bit my lips, cursing myself for blurting it out. Us? He asked with raised eyebrows. Do you? He paused and scoffed with disbelief. You are unbelievable, what were you thinking? He asked and I gulped with embarrassment. Did you think I was having feelings for you? He asked, and I shamefully lowered my head to the ground. For goddess's sake, I lost my wife and unborn child barely 5 months ago, and what makes you think that I would start having feelings for a lady? And even if I wanted to, it's definitely not you. You are not my type and I will never have anything to do with you. He yelled, shattering my heart with his words. Slowly, I lifted my gaze and held his gaze, but he looked away and turned his back at me. I have to leave. Good luck with your life, he said, entering the car without looking my way. A tear rolled down my cheek, which I quickly wiped away as I watched the car drive off. Are you okay? Lolita asked, but I didn't respond, rather I stared into space as his words echoed in my head. I'm not his type, I repeated those words, tears streaming down my cheeks, but I sucked a deep breath and hurried back into the mansion before Alphawood Leo arrived. Aren't you excited about it? Alpha Leo is announcing us to everyone, Lolita spoke, but I remained silent, still haunted by Lord Madison's words. Entering the sitting room, I found Lady Christabel, Vera, and a few gammas waiting for Alpha Leo's arrival. I caught Vera's triumphant grin, but I looked away and headed to the kitchen, where Lady Emma was likely to be. Luckily, I spotted her coming out of the kitchen. You're here, she said, and I nodded, extending my hand to her. This is my resignation letter. We've already discussed it, I said, and she nodded, taking the letter from me. Did something go wrong, or did someone in the mansion offend you? She inquired, but I shook my head with a weak smile. Everyone is kind to me, but I have this unshakable feeling that I need to discover my true identity, and I don't think I can do that here, I explained, and she nodded, fully understanding. You are a wonderful girl, Nora. I wish you luck on your journey ahead, she spoke, and I flashed her a grateful smile before making my way to the entrance door. Stepping into the living room, I met Alpha Leo with the others. Mine, Lolita howled happily, and as if he noticed me, he moved his attention towards me and flashed a warm smile. Nora, he called out my name, attempting to reach me, but Vera wrapped her arm around his hand and smiled at everyone. Hello, everyone. I have some great news to share with you all, she spoke excitedly, briefly holding my gaze before looking up at Alpha Leo. I'm pregnant, she announced, causing everyone to gasp. What? How? Alpha Leo stammered in shock. Yes, son, I understand your excitement and surprise, as I felt the same way, Lady Christabel spoke happily. Meanwhile, I maintained eye contact with Alpha Leo, witnessing his confusion. No. Lolita howled in pain, causing a different kind of anguish to course through my entire body. Alpha Leo, we are expecting a baby, Vera spoke joyfully, but Alpha Leo interrupted. How can you be sure that the baby is mine? He questioned, not minding everyone in the room. What are you saying, Alpha Leo? I'm already 2 weeks gone. Do you not remember? She asked, raising her eyebrows. Alpha Leo failed to respond, confirming that he had indeed slept with Vera 2 weeks ago, which explained the discomfort I felt that day. I know you're scared, but, Lady Christabel tried to speak, but he interrupted. I'm not scared, he yelled, locking eyes with me, but I looked away and hurried out of the sitting room. With my legs carrying me as fast as they could, I rushed out of the gate and began to run but felt a hand grab my wrist. Nora, please listen to me, he pleaded, forcing me to meet his gaze, which was filled with regrets and pain. It was a mistake, Nora. I was drunk and, let go of me, Alpha Leo. I yelled, forcefully freeing my wrist from his grip. Listen, can you please just listen, he pleaded, but I shook my head as tears streamed down my cheeks. It's over, Alpha Leo. All of this is over, I mumbled through my tears, and he shook his head. She's pregnant, my sister is pregnant. What are you going to do about it? I asked, but he shook his head and attempted to reach for my hands, only for me to step back. Don't touch me, don't you dare touch me, I yelled, and he shook his head while tears welled up in his eyes. It was a setup, Nora. I'm not even sure if that pregnancy is mine, he tried to explain, but I cut him off. Don't you dare, Alpha Leo. Don't you dare deny your responsibility. Vera may not be the best person in the world to me, but she is my sister, and I won't stand here and let you disrespect her dignity, I warned while he shook his head, unable to find the right words. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and summoned all the courage I could muster for the next words I was about to say. Reject me, Alpha Leo. Let's put an end to all of this, I demanded, and he shook his head, taking a step backward. I won't reject you, Nora. I refuse to do it, he spoke firmly as I shook my head, tears streaming down my cheeks. Why, Alpha Leo? What's the point of this bond when it was broken long ago? I asked, and he attempted to step closer, but hesitated. I won't reject you, Nora. I'll do everything in my power to become worthy of being your mate someday. Until then, I won't reject you. You are a precious gift from the moon goddess, and I won't reject her gift, he spoke firmly while I held his gaze, more tears falling from my eyes. I love you, Nora. Don't ever forget that, he declared, maintaining eye contact, causing me to shed even more tears. Those were the words I had longed to hear, but at this moment, I felt nothing but my heart shattering further. Give me some time to rectify my mistakes, and I'll come running back to you, he said, moving closer, planting a kiss on my forehead, and walked away, leaving me to stare at him as my heart shattered into a million pieces. Nora's POV 2 years later. I was seated at my work table with my eyes glued to the laptop screen as I typed away. My mind was deeply engrossed in this particular chapter that I was writing, and I didn't even realize that I was tapping my feet on the ground in rhythm with the melody playing in my headphones. Suddenly, the sound of the door creaking open caught my attention, and I looked up to see Maxwell walking into the room. He was dressed in his usual casual attire, a crisp white shirt tucked into black trousers, and his leather jacket slung over his shoulder. He flashed me a quick smile, and I responded before taking off my headphones and taking a sip of my juice as he made his way over to my desk. Hey there, how is my best-selling author doing? Maxwell said, leaning on the edge of my desk. Working hard, I see. I chuckled and flashed him a grateful smile. Yeah, just trying to start another story. Maxwell nodded, his eyes scanning the papers strewn across my desk. Looks like you have a lot on your plate, he said. Need any help? Of course not. I scoffed, and he chuckled, pulling up a chair beside me. As he sat beside me, I noticed a white envelope in his hand, and out of curiosity, I asked, "What's that?" I stared at the envelope, and he remained silent for a moment, indicating something was wrong. "What is it?" I asked again, and this time he released a heavy sigh before dropping the envelope on the desk. "That is an invitation from the Moon Pack, asking every healer of the pack to come back home," he said, while I furrowed my eyebrows, confused. "For what?" I asked, shifting my attention back to my laptop screen. "Almost half of the pack fell ill 2 days ago," he announced, causing me to furrow my eyebrows. According to the letter, it states that the source of our water got polluted, and those whose immune systems aren't strong have fallen ill. You know there's only one healer in the pack, and he can't heal everyone. So, they are calling on every healer of the pack, and that includes you, he said, while I scoffed and shook my head. How did they even get this address? I asked with a frown. Despite not activating my mind link, I wondered how they got to me. Through Dad. And there is something else, Nora, that I think you should know about, he said, while I stared at him, waiting for him to speak. Vera's daughter is dead, he announced, while I remained numb. And, he paused and held my gaze for a moment. Alpha Leo has sent Vera out of the mansion, and announced to everyone that she isn't his mate. I cursed with anger and hate. How could he just send her away? I asked and saw the confused look on Maxwell's face. Don't tell me you're feeling pity for her. That girl deserves what is coming her way. My only regret is the death of an innocent baby, Maxwell spoke with a frown, while I took a deep breath and went into deep thought. What are you thinking? Lolita asked, but I didn't respond. Such news should excite you, right? If he has announced to everyone that they aren't mates, that means he will announce you soon, and we can all be together, she spoke excitedly, but I groaned in disapproval. I don't need him anymore, Lolita. Neither him nor anyone else. I've been doing great recently all by myself, I responded, but Lolita growled in disapproval. Are you going? Maxwell asked, but I shook my head. I'm not going. I believe they will find enough healers for the job, I replied, wanting to go back to my screen. However, his next words stopped me in my tracks. Mother was also affected, he announced, causing discomfort to stir in my chest. Don't you think you should go? He pleaded, but I shook my head. Another healer will take care of her, I grumbled, but he interrupted. The healer couldn't heal her, he spoke, causing a lump to form in my throat. I beg you to go. It will only last for a week, and afterward, you can come back to France. Remember, your alpha commands your service. You can't disobey, he warned, while I frowned and stood up. I wandered around the room, contemplating my next move. When I left the pack 2 years ago, I swore I was leaving everything about my old life behind and would never return. But it seems the moon goddess has another plan in store for me. Soon, you say? I asked Maxwell. Very soon. They are expecting you guys tomorrow, he responded, while I groaned and sat back in my seat. Fine, I'll go. After all, my people need me. I can't turn my back on them, I said, and Maxwell placed a kiss on my forehead before getting up. Thank you, he smiled and left, but I couldn't concentrate on writing any longer. With a heavy sigh, I saved the chapter and stood up. I opened my closet and stared at it for a while before pulling out a travel bag. As I arranged my things inside the bag, Lolita spoke up. You know you can't avoid him forever, she said, but I ignored her and continued packing. You heard what Maxwell said. He told the truth to everyone, and now everything depends on you, she spoke, while I scoffed and shook my head before responding. I thought we've talked about this, Lolita. I asked, and she growled. Alpha Leo and I can never be together, and it's a good thing that I'm going back because we need to reject each other and move on with our lives, I firmly stated, but Lolita pushed against it. Give him a second chance, Nora. Everyone deserves a second chance, she pleaded, but I shook my head and replied, not everyone deserves a second chance. I wish you could come with me, I grumbled to Maxwell, who had just dropped me off at the airport. You know that's not possible. I'm not as lucky as you to be able to write from anywhere in the world, he responded, while I frowned and unbuckled my seatbelt. I'll be in touch. Just let me know if anything goes wrong, he said, and I nodded before getting out of the car. Closing the door, I leaned over at the window. Take care of yourself, I told him, and he smiled and nodded. With a deep breath, I retrieved my luggage from the back seat and waved goodbye to Maxwell, then made my way into the airport. After a 2-hour flight, I arrived at California Airport and hailed a taxi to a hotel, as I didn't want to stay at home. The drive was silent as I gazed at the beauty of the town. This was my hometown, but seeing it brought back painful memories, memories I had long buried. We arrived at the hotel, and I paid the cab driver. Just as I was about to leave, he called out to get my attention. Nora Edwin Watt, right? He asked, and I nodded. The author of Different? He inquired, and I nodded with a smile. I didn't realize my book had reached California. Wow, he exclaimed and approached me. Can I take a picture with you? Your novel has been a great source of inspiration for me. I see myself in the male lead character, he spoke excitedly, and I nodded. Thank you. He replied, happily took out his phone and snapped a selfie with me. Nice meeting you, he said, and I nodded before walking away. I entered the hotel, booked a room, and settled in. I felt the need to rest, but I decided to go out, have a cup of my favorite coffee, and meet up with my mom to see how she was doing. I showered and changed into fresh clothes before leaving the hotel. I wanted to breathe in the refreshing evening breeze wafting through the town, so I chose to walk to the nearby coffee shop. As I pushed open the door, a heavenly aroma enveloped my senses, making me feel alive. It was the scent of mint, so exciting and alluring, quite different from Alpha Leo's fragrance of fresh woods. Mate, Lolita growled softly, and a sudden urge to howl stirred inside me. What is he doing here? I muttered to myself as I scanned the room, searching for Alpha Leo. But to my surprise, it wasn't him. It was Lord Madison. I blurted out. Lord Madison's POV, mate is here. My wolf spoke for the first time in 2 years. Darren, is that you? I asked, dumbfounded, but he didn't respond. Instead, he forced me up on my feet while I scanned around the coffee shop until my eyes fell on Norah. Lord Madison. Mine. Darren howled excitedly in my head, causing an intense feeling to envelop me. Claim her, she is ours. Darren howled loudly, forcing my steps towards her, but she noticed and hurried out of the coffee shop. Nora. I called out as I ran after her but realized she stopped at the parking lot, her back turned to me. Mine. Darren howled possessively, making my breath pant heavily. How is this possible? I spoke, confused, and Darren quickly answered. She is our second chance mate, Madison. She is the one from the first day you met her. He spoke while I remained numb, staring at her back turned to me. Without being told, I knew she was having conflicting signals, which was strange because she was still mated with Leo. Taking a deep breath, I walked to her and stopped a few steps away. Nora. I called, and slowly she turned to me, holding my gaze with those fascinating sea blue eyes. Greetings, Lord Madison. She greeted politely and formally. Nora, I tried speaking, but she cut in, you're back in California. What brings you here? She asked, wanting to ignore the howling of her wolf. Nora, I tried speaking, but she interrupted again. Were you also called to help? She asked, but I didn't respond because it was obvious she was trying to avoid the question I was about to ask. Nora. I called out and took another step towards her, causing her scent to hit my nose. Mine. Darren howled in satisfaction. Nora, we are mates. You are my second chance mate, I announced while holding her gaze, but she didn't show any reaction, as if I hadn't said a word. Nora, I tried getting closer to her, but she took a step backward. Keep your distance, Lord Madison. She warned, and this time her gaze was filled with anger. Nora, my wolf sees you as my mate, I said, and she scoffed, I believe you're not happy about it. She spoke while I furrowed my eyebrows, confused by her words. Why would you say that? I'm not your type, don't you remember? She yelled, causing my words to get stuck in my mouth. Don't you remember what you told me 2 years ago? She asked, and I shook my head. It's not what it seems, Nora. I said that, I tried explaining, but she cut me off. Stop it, Lord Madison. There's no need for all this. She said, still holding my gaze. I'm rejecting you, Lord Madison, and I believe you will do the same. She spoke, but I shook my head in disapproval. I'm not rejecting you, Nora. I will never do that. I said and heard her scoff before she took a step closer to me, her eyes not leaving mine. I will never accept you, Lord Madison. For the past 2 years, those hurtful words you said keep buzzing in my head, but I think I have to thank you and Alpha Leo for that. You've made me work on myself, and for that, I thank you, she said, while I gulped and didn't know how to respond or where to begin. How do I tell her that I never meant all those words I said to her? How do I make her understand that I fell for her 2 years ago, and out of guilt, I had to say those words just to push her away? How do I confess that for the past 2 years, I've been scrolling through her social media pages and was one of the first people to buy her book when it first came out? How do I explain all this to her? Nora, please listen to me, I tried to speak, but she impatiently interrupted me. Nice meeting you, Lord Madison, but I have to go, she said and hurried away. Despite Darren urging me to go after her, I decided to let her be for the moment. With a heavy sigh, I walked back to the car, got into the back seat, and the car drove off. Why did you let her go? Darren asked. Because, for now, I think it's the best decision. I believe she's as shocked as I am, I responded with a sigh. Darren went silent for a moment before speaking. I'm sorry for not being able to communicate with you all these years. I've always been here, but you know the death of Sophia almost destroyed me, he spoke, and I released a heavy sigh, resting my head on the headrest of the car. What are we going to do now? It seems she's not happy with you, my wolf asked, and I couldn't provide an answer. Instead, my thoughts drifted to Leo. 2 years ago, I realized he had fallen for Nora, and despite her sister being pregnant with his child, he refused to marry her. Now he announces that they were never mates after the death of their child, which suggests he is still in love with Nora. But what confuses me is whether they are still mates or if they rejected each other. I don't understand why she would be my second chance mate if she is still Leo's mate. What games are you playing, Moon Goddess? I asked, tiredly massaging my forehead, while my recent encounter with Nora played in my head. I noticed there was something different about her. She now looks me in the eyes while talking, something she was scared and shy to do before. She speaks fluently and firmly, with a bold tone, and for some strange reason, I love the woman she has become. The car pulled into the mansion, and as I got out, I nodded in response to the greetings from the servants on my way to the living room. I reached the living room and met Emma, who respectfully lowered her head. "Welcome, Lord Madison. We are grateful that you honored our request," she said, and I nodded before asking, "Where is my aunt?" "She's upstairs in her room," she responded, and I nodded before climbing the stairs. As I ascended the stairs, memories of Nora played in my head, and with a sigh, I pushed them aside. I knocked on my aunt's door, which was opened by a female servant who lowered her head and stepped aside for me to enter. I walked into the room and found Aunt lying on the bed, with Leo sitting beside her. The moment he saw me, he released a sigh of relief and got to his feet. "Thanks for coming," he said, and I nodded, taking Aunt's hand, which felt extremely cold. "What happened?" I asked while examining her condition. "It's the polluted water and also the heartbreak of my daughter's death," Leo whispered, trying to hide the pain in his voice but failed. "I'm sorry for your loss," I expressed sympathetically, and he nodded, averting his gaze. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and allowed my abilities to take effect. Fortunately, they worked, but as usual, I had to absorb her illness and gradually heal myself. "She will regain consciousness by tomorrow," I assured, walking over to the couch and collapsing on it, ignoring the discomfort in my body because I knew the healing process had already begun. "Are you okay?" he inquired, and I nodded with a sigh before closing my eyes. We both remained in silence until he finally spoke. "Thank you," he uttered, and I sighed before responding, "Aunt is like a mother to me, so stop it," I grumbled, still keeping my eyes shut. Silence enveloped the room once again, and out of curiosity, I decided to ask a question that had been troubling me. "Leo?" I called out while opening my eyes. I held his gaze as he waited for me to continue. "Are you and Norah still mates?" I asked, and he held my gaze for a while before he responded. "Yes, we are still mates," he replied, still holding my gaze. "Why do you ask?" he demanded, but I didn't give a response. "Don't tell me you still have feelings for her," he pressed, and I remained silent. "Listen, you have to let go of any feelings or thoughts you have for her, Madison. She is my mate, and I'm announcing her to everyone. I won't hesitate to do anything to have her," he spoke in a challenging tone, while I remained silent, ignoring Darren's furious howls. "I wronged her 2 years ago, and now I just want to make everything right, so I'll beg you in the name of whatever you hold dear, to stay away from her," he warned, while I sighed heavily and stood to my feet. "I'm sorry, Leo. I wish I could heed your request and stay away from her, but right now I can't, because she is my second chance mate," I announced and saw the dumbfounded look on his face. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.